The morning sky over Dallas shimmered like brushed steel, streaked with white contrails and thin clouds that promised rain by evening. Passengers hurried through Gate 17, balancing coffees, boarding passes, and weekend excitement. For most, it was just another Friday flight to Denver, families off to ski, business travelers checking email, and college kids heading home. But in row 9, near the left window, sat, quiet, composed, and intentionally forgettable. She wore jeans, a gray sweater, and a faint smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Her book rested open on her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in 15 minutes. The flight attendant's cheerful instructions faded into background noise. She wasn't really listening. She never did. Flying used to mean something else entirely to her, once upon a different life, in a different uniform. The cabin doors sealed with a mechanical hiss. "Good morning, folks. This is your captain, Warren Rhodes, speaking," the intercom crackled. His tone was confident, friendly, exactly the sort of voice that made passengers trust they were safe at 30,000 feet. But it hit her like a physical blow. That voice. It wasn't just familiar, it was unforgettable. Her chest tightened. She'd heard it years ago, not over a pleasant flight announcement, but through the static of a military radio. Back then, she was a civilian consultant from Austin. She was Lieutenant Monroe, United States Air Force, call sign Ghost Rider. And that voice belonged to Captain Warren Rhodes, once known in their squadron as Rhino 6. She blinked hard, staring at the seat in front of her. It can't be him. The engines roared and the aircraft began taxiing. His mind raced backward through a decade of buried memories, her hand on a joystick, night vision screens glowing, the sound of her heartbeat under a headset. Rhodes had been her mentor, her link to every life-and-death decision from a Nevada bunker. And then, he was gone. The official report said his F-15E went down during a sandstorm over Helmand Province. No wreckage, no ejection signal, presumed dead. She attended the memorial, saluted his empty helmet, and buried a part of herself with it. So how could that same voice now echo calmly from a commercial cockpit? The jet lifted into the air, pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching Dallas shrink into a patchwork of roads and rooftops. She wanted to believe it was coincidence, just another pilot with a similar tone, a trick of memory, but something deeper told her otherwise. She exhaled slowly, trying to steady her nerves. The flight attendants moved down the aisle with practiced smiles, pouring coffee and reassuring the nervous flyers as light turbulence brushed the cabin. Pretended to read, but her pulse wouldn't slow. When the captain spoke again 15 minutes later, her hands trembled on the book. "Folks, looks like we've got some developing weather over northern New Mexico. We may hit a few bumps, but nothing out of the ordinary. Sit back, relax, we'll keep it smooth." It was him, no doubt now, that rhythm, the brief pause before smooth. She remembered it from briefings, from night ops over the Afghan desert. His heart thudded once hard. Why was he here, alive, anonymous, and flying passengers to Denver? Lightning flickered faintly outside the window, a warning of what lay ahead. The sign blinked on with a soft chime. Around her, passengers adjusted, buckled up, and murmured nervously. She closed her book, her reflection staring back from the darkening glass. For years, she'd promised herself she'd left that world behind. The call signs, the missions, the losses, she'd built a quiet life away from all of it. But now, somewhere up in the cockpit, the man who'd once guided her through chaos was alive, and about to fly her straight into another one. His lips parted in a whisper no one heard. "Rhino 6, how are you still in the air?" The storm outside was just beginning to breathe, and so was the past she thought had died with him. The light flickered again. This time it didn't go off. Felt the plane tremble beneath her feet. It wasn't the gentle hum of altitude adjustment. This was sharper, heavier, like invisible hands had grabbed the fuselage and given it a warning shake. Passengers murmured uneasily as flight attendants exchanged quiet glances. One of them, A young woman with dark curls tried to sound casual. "Just a little turbulence, folks. Nothing to worry about." But knew that tone. It was the same tone soldiers used when the sirens started before the first impact. The intercom came alive again. "This is your captain speaking. We're hitting an unexpected air pocket. Please remain seated." And then it hit. The aircraft dropped hard. Coffee cups flew, a laptop tumbled into the aisle, and a child screamed. A woman gasped and clutched the seat in front of her, gripped her armrests until her knuckles whitened. The plane jolted again, swaying violently left, then right. Passengers began to pray under their breath. The calm, predictable rhythm of air travel had shattered into chaos. And yet through it all, his voice remained steady. "Everyone stay buckled, we've got this." His breath caught. That wasn't a civilian pilot's confidence. That was a commander's tone, sharp, focused, impossible to fake. It was the same calm that Rhodes used to have when his fighter jets were burning fuel at Mach 2 and the world was falling apart on every radio frequency. Her mind flashed to a night 10 years ago, a desert sky lit by tracer rounds, Rhodes' voice in her headset, "Ghost Rider, hold your position," and then static, silence. She shook her head, dragging herself back to the present as lightning burst outside the windows, flooding the cabin with ghost-white light. The plane jolted again, and suddenly the intercom crackled, not with the smooth, rehearsed tone of a pilot, but with something raw, strained, human. "Ghost Rider." Her breath stopped cold. It wasn't possible. He couldn't know she was on this flight. The words had been quiet, almost a whisper beneath the static. Most passengers didn't even notice, but did. Every nerve in her body went still. The flight attendants strapped themselves into their jump seats, wide-eyed. The turbulence worsened, bags thudding against the ceiling compartments, a drink cart rolling freely down the aisle until it slammed into a row of seats. His mind spun. Ghost Rider. The call sign she'd buried, the identity she'd erased. He'd spoken it like a signal, like a plea meant for her and no one else. She leaned back, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. He knows. Lightning illuminated the storm clouds outside. Massive, spiraling towers of vapor and energy surrounded them. The pilot's voice returned, quieter this time. "Folks, we're experiencing a temporary systems fault. Please remain calm. Everything's under control." But heard the hesitation, one heartbeat of fear hidden behind the practiced calm. No, everything was not under control. She glanced down the aisle, eyes narrowing. Something in the way the flight attendants were whispering confirmed it. They were scared, and they were hiding it. Then came a metallic pop from beneath the floor. The cabin shook again, more violently. Gasps and cries filled the air. "Cabin crew, secure positions," the intercom commanded. Closed her eyes. "Rhino 6, what are you flying us into?" She remembered his voice in the desert. "If comms go dark, I'll find another way to reach you." It had been a half-joke back then, but now, the way he said Ghost Rider didn't sound like a coincidence. It sounded deliberate. The air pressure shifted, her ears popping painfully. The engines roared louder, strained. Somewhere far ahead, inside that sealed cockpit, the man she thought dead was fighting to keep 200 strangers alive. And somehow, he was reaching for her. Gripped her, forcing her mind to focus. Whatever was happening, this wasn't just turbulence. Something was wrong, something mechanical, maybe electrical. And if Rhodes was really calling her, there had to be a reason. The storm outside cracked open with a blinding flash, thunder rolling through the cabin like the sound of detonating shells. And then through the static, his voice again, barely audible but unmistakable. "Ghost Rider, if you hear me, I need you." Her pulse exploded. Around her, passengers screamed, prayed, clung to one another, but barely heard them. The sound of her old name echoed in her head like a code she'd vowed never to answer. Until now. She opened her eyes, steady and cold. The storm wasn't the only thing waking up at 30,000 feet. Ghost Rider was, too. The sound of the engines faded into a dull roar, a rhythm that seemed to pull backward through time. The cabin blurred around her. Every tremor of turbulence, every shudder in the metal skin of the plane became the pulse of another world, the one she'd left behind in Nevada's barren desert. 10 years earlier, the hum of flight simulators had replaced the roar of real engines. Inside an underground Air Force control center, Lieutenant Monroe sat surrounded by monitors glowing with satellite feeds and live drone visuals. Rows of operators worked silently, eyes glued to their screens. Her call sign, Ghost Rider, was scrawled on a strip of tape across her console. She remembered that night too clearly. The desert in Afghanistan was a furnace of dust and fire. Over the radio came the voice she trusted most, Captain Warren Rhodes, known as Rhino 6. Ghost Rider, I'm in the hot zone. Need visual confirmation. She adjusted the feed, zooming in on his target coordinates. You're clear, Rhino. Hostile convoy 2 clicks west. Copy that, engaging. She could still hear the missile tone, that sharp electronic whine before the explosion lit up her monitors. She'd whispered, good hit, and he'd laughed, calm, confident, invincible. Until everything changed. A sandstorm rolled across the valley, scrambling comms and radar. Static filled her headset. Rhino 6, repeat position, she said. No response. Then panic in his voice. Mayday, mayday, engine failure, Ghost Rider, I'm hit. She'd called his name over and over. Rhino 6, eject, eject. Then the signal vanished, just silence. They searched for days, found wreckage, but no body. The official word was KIA, killed in action. The end of Captain Warren Rhodes. She remembered staring at the empty flight helmet at the memorial ceremony, her throat too dry to speak. The flag folded, the salute, the final tap of a bugle. It was all too neat, too final. But she had always wondered. He was too skilled, too resourceful. Something in her gut never believed he was gone. And now, 10 years later, his voice was echoing through the intercom of a civilian aircraft like a ghost, refusing to stay buried. The plane jolted hard, snapping her back to the present. Passengers screamed. Overhead bins burst open, raining luggage into the aisles. Steadied herself, her instincts kicking in. She scanned the cabin automatically, counting, observing, analyzing. Years of military training weren't things you could unlearn. Her brain started piecing it together. The captain had called her by her code name, Ghost Rider. Not ma'am, not passenger in 14A. That meant one thing. He knew she was on board. But how? She hadn't used that name since her discharge. No records, no links. Unless he'd been watching. Her eyes darted toward the cockpit door, locked and silent. The flight attendants clung to their jump seats, whispering prayers. A baby cried somewhere behind her. Lightning flashed again, casting the cabin in flickering white light. Rhino, she whispered under her breath, what are you doing? The intercom crackled again, softer this time. Manual override's dead, Ghost Rider. If you're on this flight, I need your help. This time she wasn't imagining it. Her stomach dropped. The pilots weren't just fighting turbulence. They were losing systems. And Rhodes somehow was calling to her as if they were still in the same squadron, same mission, just 10 years and 20,000 feet apart. Looked around. No one else seemed to understand what was happening. The passengers heard only muffled orders, but for her, every word was coded. She could read the fear between the pauses, the weight behind his voice. Manual overrides dead wasn't random. It meant the primary flight system had failed. The aircraft could soon lose control. Her blood ran cold. She was the only one on this plane who understood the language behind his words. The irony hit her like a punch. 10 years ago, she'd guided Rhodes through the sky from a safe bunker. Now she was trapped on his aircraft, powerless, unless she stopped pretending to be just another passenger. The lights flickered, Oxygen masks swung loose again. Gasps spread like wildfire. Decision crystallized. If Rhodes had survived all those years only to fall from the sky today, she wasn't letting it happen. Not again. Not while she was on board. She tore her gaze from the window, jaw tightening. Whatever was wrong in that cockpit, whatever he meant by that coded plea, she was going to find out. And as the storm thickened outside, the old soldier inside her stirred awake. Ghost Rider was done hiding. The turbulence worsened until it felt like the plane was caught in the hands of a furious giant. Every few seconds, the cabin dropped violently, drawing screams from the passengers. The overhead bins rattled, and an oxygen mask swung loose beside its face. The child across the aisle sobbed into his mother's shoulder. The air smelled of fear and coffee spilled onto the carpet. Instinct screamed at her to stay calm, to assess. But she could hear the creaking metal, the pitch of the engine struggling against the wind. This wasn't just bad weather. The aircraft was in trouble, real trouble. The intercom crackled again. "Cabin crew, secure all passengers," came Rhodes' voice, strained now, clipped. It was the first time she had ever heard a tremor in it. Then silence. Something was wrong up front. Unclipped her and rose halfway, bracing herself against the rocking cabin. A flight attendant hurried toward her, panic hidden behind a professional smile. "Ma'am, please sit down." "I need to speak to the captain," said firmly. The attendant shook her head. "You can't, cockpit's locked, FAA regulations." Another jolt cut her off, sending them both stumbling. Caught the woman's arm before she fell. "Listen to me," she said, voice low but urgent. "The captain knows me. He called me by name. He needs my help." The attendant blinked, confused. By name. Didn't wait for permission. She steadied herself and pushed toward the cockpit, gripping for balance. Passengers shouted, some begging her to sit down. The plane dropped again, half a second of eliciting a collective cry of terror. Luggage tumbled into the aisle. "Ma'am, please," the attendant called again. But's focus was locked on that door ahead. Then suddenly, a sharp click sounded from the overhead speaker, followed by Rhodes' voice, clear, deliberate. "Let her through." Every head in the cabin turned. The attendant froze, eyes wide. She looked from to the door, uncertain whether to obey. Didn't wait for her to decide. She lunged forward, grabbed the latch handle, and felt it unlock with a hiss. The moment the door opened, a rush of hot air hit her face. The cockpit was chaos. Warning lights flashed red across the panels, alarms beeped incessantly, and smoke curled from a blackened section near the throttle quadrant. The co-pilot slumped unconscious against his harness, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. And there, gripping the yoke with both hands, was Captain Warren Rhodes. He looked older, yes, his hair streaked with gray, jawline harder, lines etched around his eyes, but he was unmistakably him. Alive, real, flesh and blood after 10 years of ghost stories. Their eyes met and time stopped. He breathed, voice caught between disbelief and relief. Her throat tightened. "You're alive." He gave a humorless half-smile. "You always did underestimate my luck." Lightning flashed outside, bathing them in stark white light. The plane lurched violently, throwing her sideways. She caught the back of the co-pilot's chair, struggling for balance. "What's happening?" she demanded. Electrical fire in the avionics bay. Knocked out autopilot, hydraulics glitching, and the storm's frying navigation. "We're losing climb control." His voice was clipped, steady despite the chaos. "I can't level her alone." His eyes darted across the instruments. Her brain, trained and dormant for years, came alive instantly. "You've got manual backup." He nodded grimly, "For now." "Then you'll need your Ghost Rider," she said, sliding into the jump seat beside him. For a heartbeat, silence. Then a faint grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Didn't think I'd ever hear that call sign again." "Didn't think I'd ever hear your voice," she replied. Outside, thunder boomed, shaking the cockpit walls. The lightning illuminated their faces, two soldiers thrown together again, 10 years later, not on a battlefield but in a storm that didn't care about ranks or medals. Rhodes steadied the yoke, eyes narrowing. "Strap in, Lieutenant. We've got 200 souls counting on us." Buckled her harness, heart pounding with something between fear and purpose. The turbulence screamed, the alarms blared, and for the first time in a decade, Ghost Rider was back on mission. The cockpit shuddered like a living beast, every bolt vibrating under the force of the storm. The wipers scraped uselessly at the torrent, slamming the windshield, lightning clawing across the clouds in relentless bursts. Gripped the armrest as the aircraft pitched left, then right. The yoke resisted Rhodes, every pull stiff and heavy like it wanted to break free. "Hydraulics on secondary," he muttered, eyes scanning the flickering displays. "Aileron controls sluggish." Leaned forward, toggling switches instinctively. "Switch to manual trim assist. You'll get more bite." He shot her a look, surprise mixing with something like pride. "Still sharp, Lieutenant." "I don't forget the things that kept me alive," she replied. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. The cabin behind them roared faintly with panic and prayer. Rhodes adjusted power on the right engine. "We're bleeding altitude, 6,000 and falling." His eyes darted to the altimeter. "We're in mountainous terrain. How close are we to the Rockies' northern ridge?" He cursed under his breath. "Too close." She reached for the flight control tablet on the side panel, only to find it dark and unresponsive. "Navigation's gone. You're flying blind." "I've flown worse," he said, forcing a grin. Another violent jolt threw them sideways. Sparks erupted from the panel above, showering light across the cramped cockpit. The co-pilot groaned weakly, still half-conscious, caught herself before slamming into the console. "Rhodes," she shouted over the alarm. "I've got her." He pulled back hard on the yoke, muscles straining. The aircraft climbed slightly, groaning in protest. "She's heavy trims fighting me." Moved without hesitation, switching to manual override. Her hands danced over the old mechanical levers that most modern pilots barely remembered, but to her they were second nature. The hum of the hydraulics changed pitch. The plane steadied slightly. The storm outside was monstrous, walls of lightning, thunder rolling like cannon fire. But inside that cockpit, two people who hadn't spoken in 10 years were suddenly operating like one mind. "Where did you go?" Rhodes asked suddenly, his tone low but clear. It wasn't a casual question, it was a decade of silence breaking through. She didn't look at him. "Now's not the time." "Now's the only time we might have." The words cut through the noise, kept her eyes on the artificial horizon. "I left because I thought you were dead. When your jet went down in Kandahar, She stopped, swallowing hard. "I didn't want to see another cockpit again." Rhodes glanced at her, sweat and rain glistening on his brow. "You were the best damn flight engineer I ever had." "And you were the worst at following protocol," she said, a ghost of a smile returning despite herself. Another alert blared, altitude warning. The aircraft was dropping again. "Left engine surging," she said, scanning the gauges. "We're about to lose power." "Not today." Rhodes slammed a hand down on the restart sequence. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared back to life. His heart hammered. "You always were lucky." He smirked. "No, just stubborn." They fought the storm together, adjusting trim, rerouting power, manually recalibrating pitch, all while the world outside howled like a monster. His calm precision countered Rhodes' raw instinct. Together, they were something terrifyingly effective. Then came a sound that chilled them both, a deep metallic groan from below. "Landing gear bay," said quickly. "Could be the cargo hold." Another groan, then a dull boom. The aircraft shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed red again, fire in the lower deck. Rhodes' knuckles went white. "We've got a breach." Straining kicked in. If that fire reaches the hydraulic lines, we're done. He met her eyes. Then you'd better do what you do best, Ghost Rider. She unbuckled, bracing herself against the shaking fuselage. Where? The access panel. He nodded toward the rear. Just after the galley, but it's a crawl space, tight and hot. Sounds like home, she said, unflinching. As she turned to leave, Rhodes called after her, his voice raw. Come back alive this time. She paused, hand on the doorframe, and gave a small, steady nod. Count on it, Captain. And with that she disappeared into the dark, smoke-filled cabin, heading straight toward the fire at 30,000 feet. The moment stepped out of the cockpit, the door sealed behind her with a heavy metallic click. The air outside was thick smoke, fear, and the bitter tang of ozone. The plane shuddered again, sending oxygen masks swinging like pendulums. Passengers cried, prayed, clung to one another. A flight attendant spotted her moving against the lurching cabin and called out, "Ma'am, you can't." But one look at 's face stopped her mid-sentence. Determined, focused, trained. Didn't slow. She grabbed an emergency flashlight, clipped it to her collar, and dropped to her knees near the galley door. The access panel to the lower bay was small, barely big enough for a person. She twisted the latch, wincing as the heat radiated upward. Ghost Rider to Captain, she said into the intercom clipped to the wall. Accessing lower deck, temps rising fast. Rhodes' voice crackled back, low and strained. Copy that. Keep comms open. Fire sensors just went red on Bay 3. You've got maybe 5 minutes before. Static cut him off. Swallowed hard, yanked the panel open and dropped into the. Immediately, smoke burned her throat. The space was tight, barely 3 feet high, cables and wiring bundles snaking along the sides. The flashlight beam cut through the haze, revealing the flicker of orange flames ahead. She pulled herself forward on elbows and knees, feeling the heat intensify with every inch. The sound of the storm outside mixed with the crackling inside, two kinds of chaos colliding. The hull moaned, metal flexing under stress. Come on, she muttered, coughing. When she reached the source, she froze. The fire wasn't coming from an electrical short. It was from a crate, one that wasn't listed on any manifest she'd seen. The lid was half-burned, exposing a tangle of wires, black powder residue, and what looked like explosives. Military grade. Her pulse slammed in her ears. She grabbed the radio. Rhodes, it's not an electrical fire, it's ordnance. Repeat, we've got live munitions in cargo bay 3. Somebody loaded this plane with something it shouldn't have. The radio hissed, then went dead. Damn it. She scanned the box. The timer on a small detonator flickered faintly, numbers jumping erratically, likely damaged by the heat. The countdown wasn't steady, but it was moving. She didn't have minutes, maybe seconds. Pulled off her jacket, used it to smother part of the flame, and then ripped a metal panel loose to expose the wiring. The heat was suffocating now, her lungs screaming. She knew this kind of setup. It was military, old school, probably stolen tech. Her hands shook, but her mind was clear. Blue wire stabilizes the loop, red detonates on break, she murmured. Of course it's red. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. One mistake and the whole belly of the plane would vanish in a flash. Then through the static, Rhodes' voice broke through faintly. Status. She gritted her teeth. Improvised explosive, manual timer, probably remote armed. I can disarm, but we're running blind. Do it fast. We just lost the right stabilizer. She's starting to roll. The plane tilted sharply, sending her body sliding against the floor grating. She caught herself on a pipe, flashlight clattering out of reach. The darkness pulsed red from the flames. Not yet, she hissed, crawling back toward the detonator. Her fingers found the wires again. She inhaled, closed her eyes, and cut the red. The beeping stopped. For a moment, the only sound was her ragged breathing and the faint crackle of dying flames. Then, slowly, the countdown light faded to black. Ghost Rider to Captain, she said weakly. Device neutralized. I repeat, bomb disarmed. Copy that, Rhodes said, relief in his voice. You just saved every soul on this plane. Tried to respond, but the floor suddenly dropped beneath her, another hit of turbulence. She slammed against the wall, pain exploding in her ribs. The flashlight went out. The intercom crackled again, his voice breaking through the static. Hang on, we're losing altitude fast. I need you back up here. She coughed through the smoke, clutching her side. On my way. Her vision swam, but she crawled toward the hatch. The flames were dying now, replaced by the sound of rushing wind outside. The storm still raging, engines howling, metal groaning under pressure. As she climbed up through the hatch and into the chaos of the cabin, one thought echoed through her mind. This wasn't a storm accident. Someone had tried to bring this plane down. And she intended to find out who, stumbled back into the cockpit, coughing smoke, her face streaked with soot. The cabin behind her was chaos, crying passengers, oxygen masks dangling, attendants yelling orders. But in the cockpit, everything narrowed to one point of focus: Rhodes. He turned as she entered, relief flashing across his eyes before he caught sight of her burns. You okay? I've been better, she rasped, slumping into the jump seat. The fire's out, but we've got a bigger problem than turbulence. He frowned. Talk to me. She met his gaze squarely. That wasn't a short. It was a bomb, homemade but with military-grade wiring. Someone wanted this plane to go down. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The storm raged outside, thunder shaking the fuselage like the sky itself was listening. A bomb, Rhodes echoed, disbelief in his voice. Affirmative, and not random either. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. She wiped sweat from her temple, smearing ash. This wasn't just about destruction, it was targeted. Rhodes adjusted the throttles, jaw clenched. Who would target a civilian flight? She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Whoever packed that crate listed it under military cargo clearance. Someone high up signed off. Military, his head snapped toward her. How the hell? I checked the crate's serial when I was down there, she interrupted. Code prefix, SR91. Rhodes froze, the color drained from his face. Say that again. You heard me. He exhaled sharply, knuckles whitening on the yoke. SR91, that's not just any code. That's a black ops logistics chain. Off-record, buried under supply manifests. It hasn't been active since Kandahar. She studied him, her tone low and sharp. You're saying someone resurrected it. He didn't answer right away. The silence was louder than the thunder. Finally, he said, there was only one man who had authority to use that chain. Stomach turned. Don't say it. Colonel Davis. Her blood ran cold. That's impossible. He died with your unit. So did I, Rhodes said grimly. Lightning flashed across his face, highlighting the haunted lines around his eyes. Back then, Davis ran ops under the name Ghost Hawk. He had clearance to move anything, ammo, drones, personnel, without oversight. When he turned rogue, we thought the desert buried him. Looks like it didn't, she whispered. The radio crackled suddenly, ATC trying to hail them through the storm. Rhodes toggled the switch. This is Flight 739 experiencing critical turbulence. We've stabilized but lost partial avionics. Request emergency vector. Static swallowed the reply. He switched frequencies again. Nothing. The storm's interference was still brutal. Checked the radar, but it flickered erratically, unreliable. Rhodes, if Davis is alive and he planted that device, this isn't just sabotage. It's a message. He looked over, brow furrowed. To who? Her eyes softened with realization. To us. The words hung between them. The past neither had faced was suddenly back, alive, burning, flying at 32,000 feet. Rhodes muttered under his breath. You think he knows we're both on board? He does now, she said. That crate wasn't random cargo, it was bait. Another alert chimed, engine temperature spike. The plane jolted again, a violent roll sending alarms blaring. Rhodes fought the yoke, muscles flexing as he steadied it. "Temperature's rising on engine 2, shouted, scanning the screen. "We've got ice forming on the intake sensors, too high altitude for this storm pattern." Rhodes narrowed his eyes. "That's not ice, it's interference. Something's jamming our sensors." "Electronic warfare tech," she realized aloud. "That's Davis's signature. He's jamming the system from the ground." He met her eyes. "He's still controlling the field, like a ghost pulling our strings." His voice hardened. "Then let's cut them." She adjusted the manual circuit to bypass external telemetry, rerouting the data through an auxiliary system. The screens flickered, then stabilized. They both exhaled. For the first time since the chaos began, Rhodes smiled faintly. "Still know how to improvise under fire." She gave a dry chuckle. "You taught me." Outside, the clouds began to thin slightly, pale light breaking through the gray. But their relief was short-lived. A new light blinked red on the radar screen. Another aircraft, fast, approaching from behind. Rhodes' voice dropped. "We've got company." Leaned closer, heart hammering. "Military signature." He nodded slowly. "Unmarked, low altitude, same transponder code Davis used a decade ago." The cockpit filled with a tense silence. Whispered, "Then this isn't over." Rhodes tightened his grip on the controls, eyes locked on the blip closing in. "No, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "It's just beginning." The radar blip grew larger, pulsing like a heartbeat. The unmarked aircraft was closing fast, too steady for turbulence, too intentional for coincidence. His gut twisted as the transponder flashed again. "That's him," she murmured. "Davis." Rhodes' hands tightened around the yoke. "He's shadowing us, probably armed." "Armed," she echoed. "With what missiles?" "Maybe imps," he said grimly. "Knock out our systems, let the storm finish the job." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the sleek silhouette of a black jet cutting through the clouds below them. Could almost feel the hum of its engines vibrating through the air. Rhodes flipped the comm switch. "Unidentified aircraft, this is civilian flight 739. You are violating controlled airspace. State your intent." No reply, only static. Then a faint click, a voice distorted, cold, unmistakable. "Still flying my skis, Ghost Rider." His blood turned to ice. "Davis," Rhodes said quietly, every muscle in his jaw tense. "You're supposed to be dead." "Supposed to be," Davis replied. "You should learn by now, Captain. Ghosts don't die, they wait." Leaned in, her voice cutting through the static. "You planted that bomb. You tried to kill 200 civilians." "This isn't about them," Davis said smoothly. "This is about you. You both buried me, remember? Kandahar, Mission Nightfall, you left me to burn." Rhodes slammed a fist against the console. "You went rogue. You sold intel to hostiles. We tried to bring you out." "Save your sermons," Davis hissed. "You took everything from me. Now I take everything from you." The transmission cut. Instantly, the black jet broke formation, climbing above them, then diving across their nose in a blinding flash. The radar screamed warnings. "Missile lock," shouted. "Not today." Rhodes threw the plane into a sharp roll, the cabin lurching violently. Passengers screamed as overhead bins burst open, luggage tumbling. The jet streaked past, leaving a shockwave that rattled every bolt in the frame. Grabbed the controls beside him, fighting the dive. You can't outmaneuver a fighter in a commercial jet. "Can if the fighter doesn't expect the jet to fight back," he gritted out. The altimeter spun wildly 25,000 feet, then 22,000. Airspeed warnings blared. The wings strained under pressure. Roads were too low. He ignored her. "If I can get us into the storm core, his radar won't track us. Or we disintegrate. Pick your ending." The plane plunged into a wall of white cloud. thunder rumbling so loud it felt like a heartbeat in their chests. For a terrifying minute they flew blind. No visuals, no horizon, just instinct. "Come on, Ghost Rider," Rhodes muttered. Work the trim manually, her hands slick with sweat. "I can give you 3 degrees of pitch. After that, we lose lift. 3's all I need." He pulled back hard. The engines roared, the fuselage groaned, but the aircraft responded, climbing, screaming through the heart of the storm. Behind them, the pursuing jet's radar lock flickered and died. They burst out above the cloud tops into calm, golden light. For a breathless moment, the world was still. Exhaled shakily, "We did it." Rhodes managed a smile. "Not yet, look." She turned. Far below, the black jet was spinning out of control, flames licking from one wing. It fell toward the clouds like a wounded predator. Then, as it vanished from sight, Davis' voice crackled one last time through the calm, faint and fatting. "You can't kill a ghost." Then silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the steady hum of the engines filled the space. Finally, Rhodes said softly, "Let's get them home." Nodded, "Roger that, Captain." Hours later, when the plane touched down on the emergency strip at Edwards Air Force Base, the runway was lined with flashing lights. Emergency crews swarmed, passengers clapping and crying as the wheels met solid ground. In the cockpit, removed her headset slowly. The adrenaline faded, replaced by quiet exhaustion. Rhodes looked at her, a faint smile in his tired eyes. "You saved them all." She shook her head. "We did." Outside, dawn was breaking over the desert, soft light spreading across the tarmac. Gazed through the windshield, where the sky still flickered with the last traces of lightning. "Think they'll believe us?" she asked quietly. "About Davis," Rhodes shrugged. "Doesn't matter if they do, he's gone now." She turned toward him, and for the first time in years she smiled, not out of relief but peace. "So are the ghosts." Rhodes nodded slowly, eyes distant. "Maybe now we can land for good." As the sun rose over California's horizon, the last transmission from Flight 739 echoed through the tower speakers. A single calm voice, signing off for the record. "This is Ghost Rider, mission complete." And for the first time in 10 years, the sky was quiet.